Hey, happy Sunday, everybody. I'm your host, Tony Twist. It's been a little while since we've been on, but I am your host for ATW All Things Wrestling Podcast. And boy, oh boy, the night after the Royal Rumble, and it was touted as maybe the greatest Royal Rumble ever going into it. And I would say it definitely didn't disappoint. But hey, I'm doing a show today because I have a special guest. If you've been living under a rock, you probably haven't heard of these guys, but if you're in the internet wrestling community, IWC, going ringside with Scott Johnson was huge in 2024. Definitely my favorite thing to take away from all the internet noise in the wrestling community. Refreshing is what I could actually call it. And I'm not going to waste any time because this man is a busy man. Mr. Scott Johnson for going ringside from Channel 4 out of Jacksonville, Florida. Let's welcome him to the show.
Hey, Tony, thanks for having me today. I appreciate it.
Hey, no problem. Thank you, Scott. I know you're a busy man, and you're actually you could be called away at any minute if something went down.
Hopefully not.
We're going to give our audience at least that heads up. So yeah, I mean, going ringside, I would love to talk to you about so many things, but I know you got a limited amount of time. Going ringside was huge in 2024. Definitely my favorite thing of the year. I wasn't even doing my show because I was just so caught up with the content that you've been providing. So you're a journalist out of Jacksonville, Florida, work for Channel 4 out of Jacksonville. How the hell did you get a legitimate news channel to do pro wrestling news?
Unprecedented, right? So I've been a news anchor for 25 years, news reporter, news anchor, straight news, no wrestling. I interviewed Jimmy Hart once. That was about it. Every day I'm interviewing politicians and killers. It's just day-to-day news. It's what I do. It's my life. So TV news, if you're aware, particularly on the local front and the national front, the business is struggling. It's not obviously there's a lot of political sessions. Take that away. It's just there's thousands of channels. There's streaming. There's everything. We're trying to stay afloat because 40 years ago there were 3 or 4 channels. Now there's 1,000. So just do the math. The business needs to stay afloat. So our company, we have a really good company, came to us about a couple of years ago and said to the bosses, we need to start something else. We need to start podcasts, which is different for us. We just don't do podcasts. It's just not something we do the news every night. And so we did the normal ones that you would expect your local news station to do. We do one on politics, business, the normal thing you expect on the news. Someone made a joke because they know I'm a wrestling fan, right? And someone made a joke in the newsroom. Hey, maybe Scott could do one on wrestling. The beauty of this is no one I work with totally gets wrestling. So that I was like, no way. This is a joke. 3 hours later, my boss calls me and says, I love this idea. I'm like, really? At a news station? Okay, sure. Sounds fun. So we started this in March of 2023. I had no idea what it'd be. I am not part of I guess you call it the IWC. I know no one in wrestling. I'm friends with no one. I don't know anyone. I am just a bald guy on television in Jacksonville starting a wrestling show because I've been a fan since the 80s, grew up on Hulk Hogan, Nitro. I kind of stopped watching in 05 for a while because I got married with kids and that happened. Life happens. But anyway, I knew enough about it to do a show on it. So it was really unique. And there was a local reason for us doing it. Our literal next door neighbor is AEW. So AEW is owned by the Khan family, who also own our Jacksonville football team, the Jaguars, Tony Khan, who everyone knows. And so they were there. I knew they were there. I was excited. Like, wrestling's in my town. This is really exciting. My TV station, for the most part, didn't really get it. Because if you're not in wrestling, because my whole world is living with people who are not into wrestling. They don't understand it. And you spend half your day explaining it. And why is it? But they know who The Rock is. They know who Hulk Hogan and Cena. That's kind of where it stops. And we would have people like, why is over at the stadium there's like helicopters and cars speeding out and police cars? I'm like, that's wrestling. Just ignore it. But anyway, when we came up with this idea, because we weren't doing it justice, we have this massive global company started by Tony Khan in our city, we're not really covering because the news doesn't cover wrestling. I mean, it just doesn't happen. Right. So we did the show, and I felt like now we're doing a service. Now, granted, we're not an AEW show, but obviously we have a great partnership with AEW because they are our neighbors. And then WWE is a couple hours south. The Performance Center where NXT is shot is in, Orlando. But at the same time, the problem was I still started this and I didn't know a single person. I didn't know anyone. I was totally blind. Like I just go on the show. I started talking about like Steve Austin and why Jacksonville, has wrestling, like stuff I could know as a journalist.
Right.
But what I discovered was after about 2 months, I'm like, wait a minute. There aren't any other TV stations doing this anywhere, ever.
Right.
And that's when a light bulb went off. I'm like, wait a minute. We have something here. The first interview I got was Jeff Jarrett. So AEW, when they go in every market, and obviously they treat us nice in Jacksonville because it's the home turf. When they go through the town, they stop by the local news stations, wherever market they're in, and say, hey, we're AEW. We're doing a wrestling show, and we'd like to bring someone on your morning show. Many times TV news shows ignore them. Right. They just like, well, wrestling's stupid. No, maybe you've seen wrestling on your morning show. Like we had a few years ago, Becky Lynch came on when SmackDown was going through.
Well, the WWE does huge promotion and they'll put people like on the Today Show and things
That's
like
right.
that. Yeah, but only like a few people.
But that's a few people. But for the most part, unless it's John Cena or The Rock, most people in newsrooms don't know them. But when I started seeing this, I emailed, yes, I want anyone you'll offer. They're like, great, a TV station wants us. So I got Jeff Jarrett, and I was like excited. But the problem was no one in my newsroom like, who? I found out I was living in a totally different world. It's like I'm serving an audience in one world, but living in an alternate universe. So I had to figure out how to bridge that. And then a few weeks later, my sports department says, hey, Ken Shamrock's in town. Would you like to have him on the show? I'm like, yes, I would. And then a few weeks later, I see Mark Marrow, old wild man Mark Marrow, used to be Johnny B. Bad. I messaged him. I'm a TV reporter. He came on. And then we got more. And then I got affiliated with more, and it started snowballing. And we started getting more and more and more. And I'm like, holy crap, we got something here. This is not what I expected. And so because they come to us because we're a legitimate media organization. And then the other part, everyone makes fun of wrestling journalists, right? They, Meltzer is the whipping boy of the internet for wrestling fans.
Yeah, for a long time.
Meltzer, and there's some good journalists there are. And these are guys with connections like Sean Ross Sapp. He's got all the connections. I don't have any of these connections. But I could bring something when they say no one in wrestling is a real journalist. Oh, I disagree. Right. I disagree. I've probably done more straight news stories than 95% of the real journalists on every TV station in America for 30 years. So there is one now. So I try to leverage that. And you mentioned 2024. 2024 is when things started really going for us. So we were very close on 3 separate occasions, and I haven't spoken about this much publicly, to get Donald Trump on the show. Okay. It fell through. I can't describe to you how frustrating that is. When you saw at the Republican National Convention, Hulk Hogan spoke, Dana White spoke, Linda McMahon spoke. Do you know why? That happened because of our show. About a year and a half ago, I reached out to the Trump campaign because my main job is being a TV journalist. And I realized when he did his first term in office, I'm like, no one ever asks him about his time in wrestling. I will. So I won't go with how. Let's just say I have access to the campaign. So they were intrigued. They liked the idea. It fell through when he got indicted. It fell through when he got shot. And I lost 2 opportunities. And I talked to him, but it had to be for news. I wasn't able to talk to him about wrestling. But they were frustrated. And then eventually they're just like, Dave Bautista spoke out against us. My show wasn't working, so they went on Undertaker's podcast. I'm not going to complain. It's Taker. He's the greatest ever. So I'm not going to complain about that. So we almost had Trump on. And I sent them a video with my request in December of last year. In my video, I said, hey, guys, I would like to talk to Donald Trump, not about politics, but hanging out with Hulk Hogan, the McMahons, Dana White, and Kid Rock. 29 people watched that private video. They would have all had to work at the campaign. 9 months later, I'm covering the Republican National Convention as a journalist. I'm in Milwaukee, and I'm told the final night of the convention is a McMahon, Hulk Hogan, Dana White, and Kid Rock. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Anyway, we've tried to inject some mainstream into the wrestling world, but it's been fun. And we had Goldberg on a while back, Shawn Michaels, Trish and Lita. When I had the biggest mark moment of my life when I was hosting a roundtable with Trish and Lita, I'm like, what has happened to my life here? I'm like, how is this happening to me? But that was a lot of fun too. So it's fun. I still don't, you say people know me. I don't think anyone knows who I am yet. I'm trying to get people to know me, but it's a work in progress because it seems like when I got in this, everyone knew everybody, but I was like this random guy in Florida. So
right.
It's taken work.
Well, the internet wrestling community is a fickle community. Yeah. I think I know I've talked to quite a few podcasts about your show.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little bit of an odd dude. Going back as a kid, I grew up. I watched the news all the time with my parents. I was born in 1980. I'm going to be 45 years old this year. So the news to me as a kid played a big part. I don't know. I was one of those weird kids that watched the news every night with my parents. And I was a huge wrestling fan from the time I was 4 or 5 years old. When you did this concept, I was like, how did this come about? Like, I was trying to figure it out. You're a straight news guy. Yep. I love that. You're a straight news guy, and you're talking about pro wrestling. To me, in my brain, it's like you're feeding all the, it's the century, I'm loving every second of this.
So a couple things. Could I tell you who WWE should put over for the strap or whether or not AEW had a good show? No, I couldn't. Right. I just can't. But when Vince McMahon's sex scandal happened and I need to start going through federal documents, that's like the back of my hand. That's literally what I do every day. When I need to do a show and I need a high-profile defense attorney or a cop or a police expert or a federal prosecutor, that I'm really good with. Right. And I know that's never existed before in pro wrestling. So like when the McMahon story happened, I was all about it. Not because I have any animus toward Vince McMahon. I grew up a fan. It has nothing to do with that. Yeah. But I saw that this is something I'm comfortable with that I know a lot of people in wrestling aren't. When Ted DiBiase Jr. still going through his federal investigation over allegations of welfare fraud happened, no one wanted to touch that. I'm like, no. I'll touch that. When Tammy Sitch, a.k.a. Sonny, went to prison for 17 years for DUI manslaughter, I said to my news team, hey, guys, this is a couple hours away. Would you mind if I spent 6 hours on the air talking about this? And we did 6 hours just with a camera in the courtroom talking about this. Stuff that scares wrestling journalists, that's regular, does not scare. It's literally just all I do. So I'm comfortable with that. Is that what I want to do? No. I've had some wrestlers tell me that people were scared to go on my show, like they're afraid I'm some gotcha straight news journalist. That's not what I want to do. I love having celebrities on and putting you over.
Right.
I mean, when news happens, I'm going to cover it. When Vince McMahon happens, I'm going to cover it. I'm going to pull up the federal lawsuit and I'm going to look at the latest development. And it's why I was able to, and I'll tell my Linda McMahon story in a bit. But, this stuff that's real life that happens, I'm comfortable with it. If I run into a wrestler, I am going to gaga, I'm going to fanboy, and I'm going to put you over. I'm not there to gotcha. And I've heard some people they hear, straight news reporter, I'm going to ask tough questions. No, I'm not. I'm there to say, you're great. Like we had Mariah May on last week because she was in town. And she sat with me and wow, you're all fawning over me. I'm like, of course I am. That's what I want to do. I want to make this a positive, fun talk show. But I also know I got a skill set as a journalist. So when stuff happens, when someone gets arrested, when someone dies, when someone gets killed, I'm comfortable with that. And I will talk about it. Not that I want that to happen. That's not what I want to focus on. But obviously, I know I'm comfortable with that. And so a lot of wrestling places, like if something legit happens, they'll copy it from the New York Times, they'll copy it from the Wall Street Journal. I won't. I'll just go get it myself and make the report because that's what I do. So that's something I know I bring to wrestling. And Victoria Crawford, formerly Alicia Fox, used to be she's from Jacksonville. She's a wonderful partner. We have her on the show a lot.
Huge fan, by the way.
What's that?
I'm a huge fan of her.
Yeah, she's great. I mean,
you brought her on. I was like, oh, that's so cool.
Follow Vic's Grow. I didn't know her. We met her, and she's been wonderful. She's been very pleasant. But she's like, we've never seen anything like you. It's really weird, and I don't quite know how to respond to that. I've just been a reporter. That's just my, what I do. So it's interesting, and I'll tell you my Linda McMahon story. So we were at the Republican National Convention. Obviously, I'm there for my day job. I'm there to cover the politics of it and all that. I had 3 interviews I wanted. Obviously, Trump didn't work out. With Linda McMahon and Kane. We got Kane. Kane was wonderful. Kane's a politician. I was extremely comfortable talking to him because I'm used to talking to politicians. But Linda McMahon was different. I didn't think I'd get her. I didn't know where she was. It's like the Super Bowl or WrestleMania would be a better analogy. In fact, Kane said this is a lot like WrestleMania, different buildings, crowds everywhere. And I'm walking through this uppity place and I hear someone on the speaker say something about WrestleMania. I'm like, oh my God. And I'm about to go on television. So I stop my cameraman and I run over. I'm like, oh my God, it's Linda McMahon. I called my TV station and said, cancel this right now. Cancel my live shot. I'm busy. They were a little upset, but whatever. So I run over. She's on a stage, but I can't get to the stage. It's an event. So I'm like scrambling around, like, how do I get access to her?
Right.
She leaves the stage and is behind a black curtain. So I'm like peeking in. I'm like, where's she at? Where's she at? I want to get this interview. At this point, because I'm an idiot and I'm not thinking about where I'm at this point, I see all those plainclothes, large men with earpieces in start hovering toward me. And I start looking around like, what am I doing right now? I realized she was back there with the Trump family.
Oh.
And I'm jumping around like a moron. And I'm like, I need to stop what I'm doing right now. So fortunately, after waiting 30 minutes, because I didn't know where she would go, she came out. It was delightful. Talked to us for a brief minute. It wasn't a long interview. It wasn't a great interview because of the circumstances. I could only do so much. And a lot of people online complained, oh, that interview wasn't very good. I'm like, well, you're welcome to find her on another wrestling podcast because I'm pretty sure you won't.
Right.
So I was excited to get Linda. I'm trying to get some interviews that no one would ever get before. I haven't told anyone. I'll just say it on your show.
An exclusive.
Trying to get Sonny from prison.
Okay.
Seeing if I can get that. I don't know what'll happen, but working on it. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, like I said, these are 2 things for me that I love. I mean, you bring something to this that the wrestling community has needed, which is a legit journalist. And I love it. Every interview, I catch it. I'm watching it. I'm listening.
And I got to make a plea. So, as I said at the beginning of this interview, I am in foreign territory. They don't quite understand what this product. They're very supportive. My station has been wonderful, but we're not a wrestling company. They don't.
Right.
This is foreign. They just let Scott do his thing. I get that, and I'm working with them to try and grow the product. Anyone who's listening, share it. Click on it. I need that. It would be at iTunes, YouTube, wherever. We're working. I hope to get a YouTube channel up. So the guy that I've seen who's kind of like me is Chris Van Vliet. I'm sure you know who Chris is. Does a great job. He used to be at
not anything like you.
Okay, well, different. But he used to. I can relate to him. He used to be at SVN in Miami, do some local news as entertainment. So I understand him. Does a great job. But I saw him and he's like 4-time Emmy winning. And then I'm like, well, I've got more than that. So I'll put that up. They come to him. I'm finding my interviews. I'm working my butt off to get them. I'm hoping they'll eventually start coming to me. Sometimes they do. But I don't know. It's a work in progress. It's been a lot of work because I was a total stranger. No one knew who I was. And hearing from people like they think I'm like a gotcha journalist. I'm not trying to do that. I'm going to cover McMahon when McMahon stuff happens unabashedly. But if I run into, like, for instance, I don't want to say the name of the interviewer, but I had a high profile wrestler who I grew up. When I met him, I was so excited. I said, could I do the interview? And his handler was there. He says, we're not going to ask about this arrest, are you? I'm like, no, I'm not going to ask about that. He's in front of me. I'm excited to talk to him.
Right.
Like if I interviewed Tony Khan, I may ask him a hard question. If I interview ever like Triple H or something, I might ask him a hard question. But I'm not going to ask a wrestler a hard question unless they want to offer it up. I had Jake the Snake Roberts on the show, and he just started going down dark tunnels, and I went with it. But I didn't prod him for that. And the one that was kind of the come to Jesus moment for me was we went down through CW Network. We're affiliated with CW in part, and they invited us down to NXT, which I was like loving it. And one of the interviews was Shawn Michaels. Only got Shawn for a couple minutes, and in those 2 minutes, I said, "Hey, Shawn, we do a weekly wrestling show at our TV station." His jaw dropped. He's like, "I've never heard of this."
Right.
I'm like, that's probably a good sign. So I'm hoping people check it out. Then I can prove the reason why I want people to check it out. So I can prove to my bosses, we need to make this bigger.
Right.
The more clicks I get, the more I can justify, hey, you've got consumers of this product and they like it. So that's what I'm working on.
Well, I love it because it's, TMZ has picked up wrestling news over the years, but it's the tabloid journalism. I'm not a TMZ fan.
Yeah.
I love what Harvey Levin does, but it's just not my cup of tea. And I love that you're just presenting it in a whole different way. And I think, like I said before I brought you on, it's refreshing.
And I get it. I understand the world it's in, which is why other journalists wouldn't, because they don't understand it. They don't understand the tabloidist or the gossip. I get that. And I go there sometimes with caution. Mm-hmm. I'll just say this. There was a development in the McMahon story in the last 72 hours.
Right. I was actually going to ask you about that, but yeah, go ahead.
Everyone reported it. I did not, because I had to consult with some attorneys. I'm like, do we go there? The advice was not at this point. And I do have that edit. So I kind of run borderline. I've got editorial things I've got to follow, but at the same time, I want people to tune into, because no one knows me. So I'm trying to, get the product out there. But I do, and like on the McMahon stuff, that's been the one, because I know I've kind of become the face of it, because no wrestling journalist is comfortable in front of a camera in 5 minutes after hearing the story. That's my bread and butter. Any story imaginable. If something happened, when Trump was shot, I was on air for 4 hours, 5 minutes after it happened. So this is my skill set that I've done over 30 years. So I'm really comfortable with that. But at the same time, I can't always jump in front of the camera because there are legal issues at play. Obviously, 99% of wrestling is not about legal issues. But wrestlers, they get on social media and they get personal and they get a little crazy. And I'm like, do I talk about that or not? It's literally a daily conversation I have in my head.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I've interviewed a number of pro wrestlers, announcers. I've had some folks from the WWE on, and it's always interesting because, I try to grab somebody a few minutes before we go live and say, hey, what can we talk about? What can we not talk about? And there's always a couple things. I had Jimmy Smith on, who was a former Monday Night Raw announcer for a couple years. Mm-hmm. And it was his time with the WWE was kind of odd. And I think at the end of it is when the McMahon scandal really started happening. So I had him on a couple times. And the second time I had him on, he said, you cannot ask me about Vince.
And I get that. So when I did a lot of these interviews over the summer, we were going to have a bunch of roundtables at this convention that I kind of become the de facto host of. We were going to have Trish and Lita. We were going to have, I don't remember, others. And I just asked beforehand, do you guys want me to touch McMahon? Because I don't have to. That's up to you.
Right.
I'm a guest here, and I would feel inappropriate for me to do that when I'm a guest host. And they asked me not to, which I was fine with. But I'll get an idea. Obviously McMahon's huge, and whether or not they touch it. but I'm not going to put a wrestler whose livelihood is based on that world in a position where they have to sink themselves. And I'll have that conversation a lot. I get it. I will happily talk it till I'm blue in the face, do the investigation. And that's the thing I can get. If I can't get a wrestler interview, I can happily get defense lawyers up the wazoo to come on the show, or ex-cops, or, former federal prosecutors, and we can talk about it, no problem. That's my alternative when I can't get a wrestler to talk about it. So that's kind of where that's at.
Yeah, that's understandable. Now, what has it done for your television channel? What's it done for the ratings? Has they got any other
that's
viewers
what I'm working on? So this was a total experiment, not wrestling, just the whole podcast thing. Mm-hmm. Wrestling is so foreign to what we do, but they understand it, that there's money there, but they don't understand how to market it. So right. You're getting me before I have a meeting with the bosses, and I probably shouldn't say all this, but I'll give you an example that's pretty public. So I have a normal Facebook page for my Scott Johnson, the local news anchor, and we get a few thousand fans, and they follow it. And when I started this show, I'm like, where do I share it? Like, we got these interviews. Where do I share it? I put some on that page. 0 people interacted with it. They could have cared less. And I would occasionally get a grandma. My grandson watches that stuff. And that'd be the best I'd get. I'm like, I am going to the wrong audience. Right. So I tried out TikTok. TikTok has been a blessing for me because A, we've got the interviews. People like that. Right. B, people like, and as we talked about, seeing a man on the news talk about wrestling. They like that. So I bring that for them. And I'm really, really comfortable when I read something, getting in front of a camera and talking coherently about it in a way that's not going to get me sued. So I'm comfortable with that too. But at the same time, I'm not just some guy. I have bosses to answer to. I could be sued if I do something wrong. Right. So, I have liability. I'm not, and we keep going to McMahon because that's the easy one. Vince McMahon's not going to sue a random guy online. He might sue me because he's, there's a hierarchy. There's a structure there. It's not just me. I'm representing a company, and we have journalistic standards. Right. So, that's something to deal with. But TikTok's been great. And here's the thing about ratings. This is literally why we're doing this show, and literally why I'm working to transition how our product is presented. It's not about ratings on the 6 o'clock news anymore. Right. It's just not. It's about downloads. It's about live streams. Yep. That's what we are literally, every TV station in America, wherever you live, is going through that right now. A lot of TV stations are struggling because they don't know how to transfer. They are set up to be a broadcast television operation. They need to learn how to stream. Right. The reason why my company likes this is giving me free reign to do whatever. They have been so wonderful to just let me explore this new world that TV news never touches. Is they understand there's something there. So we're still in the process of getting there. But right now, what I've learned for instance, our show lives on a news page. So when people find my show and they click on it, well, they don't come back to the show because they see news. I know that's not what they're getting. So right. We're working on streamlining this. So like when they go to Chris Van Vliet's show, I just use Chris, and they click on his, well, they got everything they click on is wrestling or UFC or whatever. Right. So need to work on, we need to get that streamlined. That's one of my priorities, is to get the product streamlined. So when you go to our product, our show, you get stuff you like. I mean, you don't click and the next video is a police shooting, and the next video you get is Bushwhacker Luke telling an old story. That's right. What I want you guys seeing.
Exactly. Well, you found an amazing way to pivot. And yeah, I think, when with technology and the internet and everything, I mean, the 24-hour news channel, that put a huge dent into, network yep. news, so in this day and age with the internet, I mean, finding a way to pivot and change and evolve. I mean, I think that's amazing. And like I said, thank you for doing this in the wrestling community, the internet wrestling community, because I love it.
And anyone with influence out there, please share my stuff. I want to be friends. I want to collaborate. I'm not some stranger random news guy looking to get you. So anyone watching, please share our stuff. I just want to make the industry grow. That's my goal here.
Yeah, we're going to spread the word and get it out there, because I think this is amazing. I think 2025 will be huge for you guys. I bet you're probably happy that TikTok's not going away.
Oh, God, I was so relieved. I was so relieved. I'm like, now I got to restart this whole thing. Yeah.
Well, Scott, I know you got a limited amount of time, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up for you. I would like to talk to you off, when we end the show here in a moment, but please tell my
audience. Really quickly, Scott Steiner and AJ Francis Top Dollar on episode 105. Check it out now.
Now, please tell my audience everywhere where to find you.
So what I tell people is just search Going Ringside on Google, on YouTube, on TikTok or Instagram are the best places for daily updates. But we might be in the process of changing some channels. So just go to Google, type in Going Ringside. You'll find us. We're not hard to find. And I hope to bring you some of the biggest interviews that wrestling has ever seen in history this year. So I'll keep you posted.
I'm looking forward to it. Scott Johnson, Going Ringside. I'm your host, Tony Twist, ATW All Things Wrestling Podcast. Scott, thank you so much for joining us today. And we are going to spread the word, and we're going to make Going Ringside the biggest thing ever in 2025.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you very much, Scott. Everybody, thank you for joining me today. Stay tuned. We got more shows. We got more interviews coming. ATW All Things Wrestling Podcast. And happy Sunday. We're out of here.